What's up guys, today I have a complete guide for Thoma, who is Genshin Impact's newest supportive character. Right off the bat, let me tell you that his supportive capabilities are actually kinda nice for a 4-star character. He has a really strong shield that's probably second or third only to Zhongli and Diona in terms of strength, which makes him a solid shielder alongside Diona for players who need more survivability but don't have other premium 5-star units like Zhongli or Kokomi. As always, this guide will cover how to get the most value out of your Thoma with best artifacts, weapons, and team comps. Without further ado, let's get this guide rolling. Before we get into the artifact builds, let me quickly cover all the basics and other important details that you need to know about Thoma since he's a completely new character to Genshin. To start things off, I want to discuss his shielding ability. Thoma has a really unique method of shielding, and he has two different ways to shield your party. The first way is simply through using his elemental ability, which is extremely similar to the way Xinyan works. The second way to shield is through your elemental burst, which works a lot like Xingqiu's elemental burst. Every time your active character executes a normal attack, Thoma will summon a wave of flames to create a coordinated attack with the party member, which can be triggered every 1 second. The kicker here is that unlike Xingqiu, Thoma's elemental burst has an additional effect where he will summon a shield each time his elemental burst attacks with a wave of flames. This shield only has a fraction of the HP compared to the elemental skill shield, but thanks to the way that Thoma works, each hit from the elemental burst will give us a new shield, and the remaining HP percent from the current shield will combine with the new shield to make an even stronger one. Slowly building up a stronger shield with the elemental burst is the bread and butter of Thoma's kit that allows him to provide consistent shields for the team. Most of the time, the elemental burst shield will be too weak to last long enough, so what you can do is start out with Thoma's shield from his elemental ability and start adding extra shield HP through his elemental burst. The other thing that I want to quickly discuss before we talk about artifacts is Thoma's pyro application. I talked about this briefly in my previous Hu Tao video, but for those who don't know, Thoma's elemental burst has an internal cooldown, which basically means that it restricts his elemental burst from applying pyro every single hit. Instead, when you attack with the ability, it will only apply pyro every other hit. This does diminish his ability to support hydro characters a tiny bit, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's out of team compositions entirely. Overall, Thoma is a character where we are more focused on his shielding capabilities or raw damage rather than his pyro application, and this idea is reflected through his best artifact sets. Additionally, he does have an energy problem at lower constellations, so his best artifact and weapon options will also reflect the importance of building energy recharge. Anyways, now that you're equipped with a little bit more information regarding Thoma's utility, let's get into the most important part of this guide, which covers how to build Thoma. For artifacts, Thoma has two different builds that I would recommend. One is a build that's expensive and focuses on Thoma's elemental burst damage, while the other is quite cheap and focuses more on shield strength. Starting off with the best in slot for the maximum burst damage build, we have the 4-set Emblem of Severed Fate. Since Thoma has an 80 energy cost burst and he's very hungry for energy, we're naturally going to be building a lot of energy recharge on him. With the 4-set Emblem of Severed Fate, not only will this make Thoma easier to build, but it also provides us the best elemental burst damage once you get over 160 to 180% energy recharge. As for other options, since ESF is a highly contested artifact set among other characters, we can use things like the 4-set Crimson Witch of Flames, or simply just the 2-set Crimson Witch of Flames with either the 2-set Noblesse, 2-set Gladiator / Shimenawa, or the 2-set Tenacity of the Millith. The full 4-set Crimson Witch of Flames is a pure downgrade in terms of damage compared to 4-set ESF, so generally if you're not running the 4-set emblem, you're going to want to choose between a combination of the 2 sets on screen rather than the full Crimson Witch set. Between these 2-set combinations, Noblesse would be the best of the 3 options for elemental burst damage. The 2-set Gladiator / Shimenawa will provide balanced damage between Thoma's skill and his burst, while Tenacity of the Millith will provide a stronger shield in return for weaker damage overall. As for artifact substats, the pure damage build is very strict since it's on the more expensive side. Since Thoma's elemental burst does deal damage based on a portion of his max HP, the build mirrors Zhongli's standard build, except instead of geo damage bonus, we want pyro damage bonus. So this means HP percent in the sands, pyro damage bonus in the goblet, and crit rate or crit damage in the circlet. Attack percent is viable for the sand slot since it does give more damage compared to HP percent, but keep in mind that it guts your shield's ability to tank hits, which is an important aspect of Thoma's kit. As for artifact substats, we want crit rate, crit damage, HP percent, and energy recharge. Other than that, flat HP, attack percent, and a little bit of EM also wouldn't hurt. Now as for the support slash shield bot Thoma, this is the build you want to opt for if you simply don't have the resources to build him as a DPS. For the best in slot, we have the 2-set Tenacity of the Millith plus the 2-set Emblem of Severed Fate. This combination of artifacts focuses purely on having the strongest shields and having Thoma's elemental burst up as much as possible for consistent shielding. Other options aside from this combination include the 4-set Emblem of Severed Fate again, or even the 4-set Noblesse Oblige to provide an attack percent buff to the party. In artifact stats, the Sandslot will want energy recharge or HP percent, while the Goblet and Circlet both want HP percent for maximum shield strength. Last but not least, in artifact substats, we want to focus a lot of HP percent and energy recharge. Again, flat HP, attack percent, and even a little bit of EM are also nice to have as well. Moving into Thoma's weapons, recently we've gotten a ton of options that perform really well on Thoma, which has definitely made him a little bit easier to build since we have so many options to choose from. Unlike the artifact section, these weapons will not be split into two parts, and instead I'll only be ranking polearms for a Thoma focused on elemental burst damage. If you're looking for weapons for a shield bot Thoma, it's actually super simple. You can pick Staff of Homa, Black Tassel, or any other weapon that has energy recharge or EM as its stat. Anyways, for the actual rankings, it should be no surprise that the best in slot for a sub DPS Thoma is Staff of Homa. Yeah, this weapon is fitting because we can call it Staff of Thoma, but there's also the fact that this weapon does give him extra HP percent and crit damage, which is just insane given the way his abilities work. If you happen to get this weapon and don't actually have Hu Tao, Thoma is definitely one of the best characters to use this broken spear on. In the number 2 spot, we have Engulfing Lightning. Again, this weapon is pretty rare and most players will be using this weapon on Raiden Shogun, but if you do happen to have this weapon freed up, then Thoma definitely appreciates it. Both the passive and energy recharge are wonderful, especially when paired with the 4-set Emblem of Severed Fate. At number 3 and 4, the next best damage options will be the Catch and Wavebreaker's Fin. The Catch is our first free-to-play option, and it offers fantastic bonuses just like Engulfing Lightning. Wavebreaker's Fin is the option for players who pulled on the weapon banner but didn't get Staff of Homa, or are simply using Staff of Homa on Hu Tao. This weapon provides some insane synergy when paired with Xiangling, Xingqiu, or Raiden Shogun. No matter which of these two options you decide to choose, the elemental burst damage is exactly what we want. Coming in at number 5, we have Favonius Lance. While this polearm does not provide nearly as much damage as the other 4-star options, this weapon is very high on Thoma's priority list because of the utility it provides. Thoma is heavily dependent on keeping his elemental burst up, and he doesn't have access to a sacrificial weapon like Xingqiu has access to Sacrificial Sword. And if you haven't noticed yet, Thoma does kind of have a glaring energy problem, so the reason why Favonius Lance is close behind the Catch is because it's your next best substitute for energy recharge. Beyond these 5 weapons that I just listed, there are a plethora of options that are also solid on Thoma but not quite top tier. The group of weapons that are all fairly close to each other include Scoured Spine, Deathmatch, Blackcliff Pole, Vortex Vanquisher, Primordial Jade Wing Spear, Kitane Cross Spear, and Dragon's Bane. For Scoured Spine, this is a tempting choice that works really well over Favonius Lance if you don't need the extra energy particles from the Favonius Lance passive. Otherwise, the Scoured Spine passive is pretty useless itself aside from the tiny bit of crit rate that it gives Thoma. Deathmatch and Blackcliff Pole are great options if you desperately need crit stats but don't have any 5-star polearms. Even if you could just muster decent artifacts, I'd stick to the options like the Catch or Wavebreaker's Fin. Vortex Vanquisher and Primordial Jade Wing Spear look really good on paper, but what holds them back is the fact that their passives can only be stacked when Thoma is on the field. If this were not the case, these weapons would shoot up as some of the better options on Thoma, but unfortunately that's just not the reality. That doesn't mean these weapons still aren't good, it's just they're not as good as they could be. Lastly, Kitane Cross Spear and Dragon's Bane are the EM options you can choose. Given that Thoma is already difficult to build when just focusing on crit stats and energy recharge, I would generally avoid these weapons unless you're opting for the non-crit build that focuses more on pure shielding and reaction damage. With most of Thoma's guide now done and dusted, let's take a break and quickly look at my own Thoma build. Now that you've seen my Thoma's build, let's finish up this guide by talking about some of the popular Thoma team comps upon his release. Starting off with the first team, we have a very popular team modified slightly to include Thoma. The original team is the Raiden national team, but instead of Xiangling, we swap her out for Thoma. This turns our full composition into Thoma, Raiden Shogun, Xingqiu, and Bennett. The premise of this team is fairly simple. Since Thoma's elemental burst works the same way as Xingqiu, there is no problem with synergy between him and Raiden Shogun like there is with Beidou. Thoma and Xingqiu have 80 energy cost burst, which powers up Raiden Shogun, and then she batteries the two for extra energy in return. Altogether, these three can create both Vaporize and Overload reactions, which is commonly known as Vape Load. And of course, Bennett is the glue to this team, providing extra healing, an attack buff, and pyro energy for Thoma. For our second team, we have a less popular team, but that doesn't make it any less boring than the Raiden plus Thoma setup. The team that I'm talking about is the Mono-Pyro team, which consists of Thoma, Bennett, a Pyro DPS, then Kazuha or Sucrose to abuse the 4-set Viridescent Veneerer. Bennett and the Animo unit are pretty set in stone because we need their utility to buff our damage since we don't have reactions to work with, but the third Pyro unit has a lot of flexibility. The most popular picks here are definitely going to be Xiangling and Hu Tao, however other choices like Yoimiya and Yanfei can also work quite nicely. The only thing to keep in mind is that Thoma's elemental burst is only melee range, meaning you need to attack quite close to the enemy with ranged characters. Normally this would be a slight problem, but luckily for us, Thoma's shield can guard these characters, making close rate combat with ranged characters much more manageable. With our third team, we have the duo of Xiao and Thoma. Alongside these two, we want to use a second Pyro unit for the Pyro Resonance and a second Animo unit to battery Xiao. Bennett is an obvious choice since he's always a fantastic character no matter where you put him, but other Pyro options include Xiangling or even a supportive Catalyst character like C2 Klee for her defense reduction or C4 Yanfei with Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers. As for your second Animo unit, it can be any Animo character as long as you correctly funnel energy so that Xiao can have his elemental burst up as much as possible. While this team may sound like a meme, as long as you normal attack between every plunge attack, Thoma works as a decent shielder for Xiao even at C0. But the real fun of this team comes when Thoma is C6 because he can give Xiao some extra plunge attack damage, which is always going to be fun to play with. Last but not least, we have the most speculated team featuring Thoma, which is the Hu Tao Vaporize team. This team is the exact same as the Mono-Pyro team, but instead we swap Bennett with Xingqiu to give us a full composition of Thoma, Xingqiu, Hu Tao, and Sucrose or Kazuha. The reason why this team looks extremely strong on paper is because of the synergy Thoma has with the rest of the party. Not only does he provide shielding for Hu Tao like Zhongli does, but he also generates extra pyro energy for Hu Tao and grants the party the Pyro Resonance for the extra attack percent. But now that Thoma is fully released, this begs the question, is the team actually good in practice? Well, the answer is yes. It may be really hard to get the team to work perfectly, but for most players the compatibility is more than enough. The biggest concern with Thoma was whether or not he would steal Vaporize reactions from Hu Tao, and even with his internal cooldowns, he still can't completely avoid stealing a few reactions. However, this is not the end of the line for the team, as there is one thing that we can do to improve the consistency of Hu Tao's Vaporize reactions. If you don't have C6 Xingqiu, which does give more Hydro application, what we can do is infuse Sucrose or Kazuha's elemental burst with Hydro. This will give us a second source of Hydro application, and it makes Hu Tao's Vaporize reactions much more consistent. As a casual player, that's really all you need to know about this team, and it'll work out just fine. However, there is a little bit of buzz on the more theory crafting side of the community regarding how to optimize the rotations and damage of this team to give Hu Tao her maximum damage. I'm not going to cover that here since the video is already long enough, but if you guys want me to do a guide with Thoma and Hu Tao, similar to my national team guides, definitely let me know down in the comment section below. With that, it's time to wrap up the video. I know that was a lot of information to soak in, so hopefully I got through that as concise as I possibly could make things. If you enjoyed this guide or thought it was useful, be sure to support both the video and the channel. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.